Tonight.
In the end, this is not as it may appear. A story of inaction in a time of crisis.
The January 6th House Select Committee lays out their argument of alleged dereliction of duty by President Trump during the Capitol siege and pushing past pleasantries.
To a place where people can say, I'm blessed, and what is the rest of the story? What is the fuller story?
The work some faith groups are doing to dig deep and address mental health. Plus,
that data haunts me.
How the church is working to win back the growing number of young people walking away from faith. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
The Select Committee painting a portrait of a president unwilling to accept an election loss. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
In Washington, I'm Caitlin Burke. Thursday night, the January 6th committee held its final primetime hearing for the summer. While millions of Americans may have tuned it out, one person who did not, former President Donald Trump.
Mr. Trump, the focus of the hearing, unleashing a scathing rant after the committee detailed what he did not do during the Capitol siege and after it released never-before-seen outtakes of Trump's recorded response. Capitol Hill correspondent Matt Galpin joins us now. Matt, committee members say the investigation will continue and will resume with hearings this fall. Is that right?
Yeah, that is right, and that means that this investigation could stretch deep into the midterm election season when hearings pick back up in September. The committee says that there was a dereliction of duty from the Oval Office in the aftermath of January 6th.
187 minutes, a little over 3 hours. That's how long committee members allege former President Donald Trump shrugged off requests from aides, advisors, and family members to stop the mob overrunning the Capitol. They charge rather than intervening, he chose to watch the violence play out on TV, not wanting to do anything to stop it.
Almost everybody wanted President Trump to instruct the mob to disperse. President Trump refused.
The committee presented text messages from Donald Trump Jr. and former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows urging something to be done to stop the violence.
He's got to condemn this ASAP. The Capitol Police tweet is not enough. Mr. Meadows replied, I am pushing it hard. I agree.
Recorded testimony from former White House counsel Pat Cipollone showed multiple advisors had urged the president to do more.
People need to be told. There needs to be a public announcement fast that they need to leave the Capitol.
There were also unreleased images and audio from congressional leaders, including Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell pleading with defense officials to secure the building.
We need you to get the building cleared, give us the okay so we can go back in session and finish up the people's business as soon as possible.
The committee adding Trump made no such efforts to contact law enforcement or the Pentagon. Video and recorded testimony was accompanied by witness testimony from former White House aides Sarah Matthews and Matthew Pottinger.
Have defied the seat of dust. It's defiled, right? See, I can't see it very well.
The committee also zeroed in on Trump's attempt at a video response the day after, including outtakes where he apparently refused to declare the election over, even after it was certified for Joe Biden.
But this election is now over. Congress has certified the results. I don't want to say the election's over. I just want to say Congress has certified the results without saying the election's over, okay?
Now, committee members also said that one of the last things the former president said on January 6th was, quote, Mike Pence let me down. Now, following the hearings, the former president took to his own social media platform to call the committee hearings fake and continued to insist that the 2020 election was rigged. Guys.
Matt, what's next for the committee?
Well, we now have about a 6-week or so break until September when we're promised more hearings as committee members say more evidence is being made apparent and more witnesses are coming forward. They also expect to release a preliminary report in September of their findings before they expect to release a final report before the end of the year. John and Caitlin.
All right, Capitol Hill correspondent Matt Galka. Thanks, Matt. Well, here with us now is Julia Manchester, political reporter for The Hill. Julia, happy Friday. So there were so many revelations last night, from Secret Service phone calls to their family members thinking that it might be the last time that they would speak with them, to hearing the voices and seeing the faces that we just saw in Matt's package of congressional leaders on the phone seeking the military's input about securing the Capitol. And, of course, that video, the outtakes of former President Trump showing his refusal to say that the election was over. Julia, what was the biggest takeaway for you?
Goodness, I mean, I think there were obviously lots of revelations, but I think, viscerally, the most emotional takeaway I've heard was the first one you brought up, Vice President Pence's security detail calling their family and their loved ones, essentially saying goodbye, because that's how dire the situation was. I really think that was, for the committee, they probably needed that color to really, send that point home that the vice president and his team were truly in distress. And we have to remember, these are Secret Service members. These are people charged with protecting high-ranking government officials. They're taxpayer funded, and this is what they do. However, in the situation was so dire that this is what they were essentially pushed to. And I think you contrast that with President Trump's response, him being in the White House dining room for hours on end, watching Fox News as this played out. And, the last words he said publicly, at least that day, to those around him at the White House was, Mike Pence didn't have my back, or Mike Pence let me down. So very much not a good look for the president in terms of or the former president in terms of what came out last night.
This hearing was the last until September. Did the Select Committee signal where they're headed next? And is the case they've built enough for a DOJ criminal investigation, maybe even prosecution against Trump or his allies?
I don't know if it's necessarily enough, because I think if they had reached that threshold, they probably would have ended the hearing sooner. However, these could drag on, and I think you're probably going to see them continue to try to prove this point of intent, that President Trump intentionally meant for this damage, for this chaos to really ensue on January 6th in Capitol Hill. What's interesting, though, is that it'll be September by the next time these hearings are. And then you have Liz Cheney, who is facing a primary challenger backed by Trump over her role on the January 6th committee. So it's almost really starting to bleed in with the campaign trail.
Julia, real quickly here, we've got dueling campaigns tonight. President Trump endorsing an opposing candidate in Arizona versus VP Pence. How will that affect this upcoming election in November?
It's going to, we'll see which candidate comes out on top. It seems like Kari Lake is the front runner compared to Pence's backed candidate, Karen Taylor Robson. However, if we see candidates like Kari Lake, who are, very much talking and focusing on the 2020 election results and proving touting the unproven claim that Trump won the election, I'm wondering if that's going to hurt Republicans in November, when so many other Republicans have been focusing on those more kitchen table issues like the economy. We'll have to see.
All right, Julia Manchester with The Hill, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Julia. Well, President Biden continues to isolate at the White House tonight as he battles COVID. Though fully vaccinated and double boosted, his diagnosis came less than a day after an event in Massachusetts and a week after foreign travel in the Middle East. CBN's Tara Mergener has the latest on his recovery and concerns about the latest variant.
In a letter released today, White House doctor Kevin O'Connor says Biden's symptoms continue to be mild and are improving. This as health experts warn about a fourth wave of the pandemic.
Keep the faith. It's going to be okay.
Following President Biden's COVID diagnosis, health officials are concerned over another summer surge. The COVID subvariant known as BA.5, now responsible for 80% of U.S. reported cases this week and more worldwide.
In the past 6 weeks, the global weekly number of reported cases of COVID-19 has almost doubled.
An estimated 50 to 100 million Americans are expected to become infected before next spring. With nearly a third of U.S. counties currently reporting high case numbers. Data shows that vaccines are less effective in preventing BA.5 than previous strains.
The good news is that most of those infections now, those breakthrough infections, are generally outpatient illnesses, so they're not resulting in severe infection.
BA.5 also emerges as at least 1 in 5 people who've had COVID report a wide range of long-term health conditions, from fatigue to chronic pain.
And I really appreciate your inquiries and your concerns. But I'm doing well.
Meanwhile, Biden appears to be on the road to recovery as he's monitored by his private health team and taking the antiviral drug Paxlovid given his age.
I think it's the right thing to do for anybody who's at elevated risk as defined by the CDC FDA, which basically is anyone over the age of 50.
As for the newer COVID strains, Pfizer and Moderna have announced a change in formulation to combat those subvariants. New guidance on eligibility for booster shots could come as early as this fall. In Washington, I'm Tara Mergener, CBN News.
The struggle with stigma, how the church can do more to help those dealing with depression, next. Major depression impacts more than 8% of Americans, but new research could change the way mental health disorders are treated. For years, depression has been blamed on a chemical imbalance of serotonin, that hormone that regulates mood, sleep, and digestion, among other things. But a recent study from University College of London finds no clear evidence serotonin levels are actually responsible for the disorder. This new data could mean antidepressants, which boost serotonin in the brain, may not be the best go-to treatment. The results of this new peer-reviewed study could have vast implications for millions suffering from depression worldwide.
Well, while there's so much on which Americans disagree right now, there is growing consensus around the need for greater access to mental health services. But talking about the issue isn't always easy.
Oftentimes, people feel stigma and shame. CBN News medical reporter Lori Johnson explains how some churches are making it easier for people to share their struggles.
In the name of Jesus.
Dr. Tama Bryant, an ordained minister and clinical psychologist, knows firsthand how Christians can spiral into despair.
These things happen even within the church.
In her book, Homecoming, Dr. Bryant describes overcoming her trauma from sexual assault and keeping her faith by using therapeutic approaches, including one of her favorites, praise dance.
Some survivors get to a place where they hate their bodies because it's the place of the violation. But this is really a gift from God. And so to be able to reclaim it, to honor it, to move our bodies, to dance to the glory of God, it has been a wonderful part of my healing.
As president-elect of the American Psychological Association, Dr. Bryant says the church needs to create a culture where people can admit they're struggling and seek help.
I know in my church tradition, when people say, "How are you?" the usual answer is blessed, or "I'm blessed and highly favored." And so we want to get to a place where people can say, "I'm blessed, and what is the rest of the story? What is the fuller story?"
The tide is starting to change.
While many churches are beginning to signal to their members that it's okay to struggle with mental health issues, some are taking it a step further by developing ministries to help people with these types of problems.
At New Life Virginia Beach, Dr. Cyrus Williams leads a team of Christian professionals who treat people in the comfort of their own church.
Because we do the counseling here. That's the unique part about it. We do the counseling here in the church. So we trying to take away that stigma.
Demand is high given the growing number of those struggling with depression and anxiety.
And then we get into addiction counseling. We may go into more of some trauma that people are dealing with spiritual trauma, sexual trauma, any kind of violence. And then suicide is a big issue.
While counseling can be affordable for some, the goal is to make it achievable for all who need it.
To get to a nominal pay, we need really donations for people to donate salaries. We have people, if they donate money for a salary, we can see so many more people.
The ministry has become a natural progression because of the positive path pastors have taken from the pulpit regarding mental health issues.
We, as pastors, recognize we're not clinicians. We don't provide mental health care, but we do recognize that it is an essential part of being whole before the Lord. And so we want to partner with those who are professionals, just like we would partner with a doctor who is a professional in dealing with cancer or other sicknesses.
New Life Church also hosts mental health forums and seminars.
And so we wanted to make sure that our congregants, our leaders, were equipped to be able to recognize symptoms of people who are struggling with mental health issues and could then refer them or get them the help that they need.
So while mental health problems within the church can still be considered taboo, more leaders are trying to erase the shame so people can get the help they need. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Coming up, a mass exodus of millennials. Why young people are leaving the church when Faith Nation returns. And welcome back. Americans are losing confidence in U.S. institutions. That's the finding of a recent Gallup poll. The presidency, the Supreme Court, and Congress, all of them are at an all-time low. Only 27% say they have a great deal or quite a lot of confidence in the presidency. 25% feel the same about the Supreme Court. Conversely, only 7% say they have a lot of confidence in the High Court. Faith in organized religion is also falling, down from 37% in 2021 to just 31% this year.
That loss of confidence could be a factor in why people are walking away from faith. Daily prayer, church attendance, and the number of people who identify as Christians are all on the decline.
This trend includes the rise of people with no religious affiliation, known as religious nuns. CBN's Brody Carter explains, or explores the trend in our next report.
If you want to know how far my love can go, just how deep, just how wide.
John Steingard's faith journey reflects America's changing religious landscape. Once part of a Christian band, he's joined a burgeoning group that blurs the traditional lines of religious identification.
I definitely don't think I literally believe in the God that most Christians would say that they believe in, but I'm not so convinced that Christian faith and practices is always a harmful thing.
And he's not alone. Study after study shows Christianity is not the force it once was.
That data haunts me.
In 2021, Pew Research found self-identified Christians making up 63% of the U.S. population, a drop from 75% just 10 years ago. The majority of this decline is happening among Protestants, dropping 10 points in the last decade, while Catholicism remains relatively unchanged. During the same period, the group called religious nuns has steadily grown.
When we ask people about their religious identification, are you Protestant, Catholic, Mormon, Orthodox Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, Hindu, atheist, agnostic, something else, or nothing in particular? The religious nuns are those people who answer that question by describing themselves as atheist or agnostic or as simply nothing in particular.
In studying the secular shift, researcher Gregory Smith says he sees no sign of this trend slowing down. Religious nuns currently account for about 3 in 10 U.S. adults.
That's, triple, perhaps even getting close to quadruple the share who said that about 3 decades ago.
Other indicators that Americans are growing less religious include prayer. Fewer than half of adults do so daily. 30% say they pray seldomly or not at all. Still, 4 in 10 say they consider religion to be very important in their lives.
So many of these people they grew up in our children's ministries. They grew up in our youth groups. Somehow we missed them, man. We were unable to get them ready to live in the world that their life is playing out in now.
Renowned pastor, author, and church planter Matt Chandler says the church must see and accept this harsh reality before it can move forward.
You got the kingdom of God and you got the kingdom of darkness. And really, I think what you're seeing is there was, I think, a collapse of robust discipleship for an extended period of time.
To better understand the reasons why someone would leave their faith, I talked with Steingard, former lead singer for Hawk Nelson, a Canadian Christian rock band.
Anybody that leaves any religious community, they have to figure out how to sort of hold themselves together and also how to make their way in the world. And that's actually not so easy.
Steingard, whose father and father-in-law are both pastors, announced his decision on Instagram at the height of the pandemic. His announcement sent shockwaves through the Christian community.
People like myself who decide to leave a faith tradition tend to be very focused on the negative aspects of that tradition when we leave, right? You know, like we tend to want to point out all the things that we think are harmful or unfair or, you know, unjust.
Steingard believes 3 major reasons people are currently leaving the church include differing beliefs on gay rights, failed support for social justice issues, and political platforms using faith to advance certain polarizing agendas.
The church has to own that we really dropped the ball on discipling men and women for the world that they live in. Even the 1 million or so kids that have left our church present a stunning opportunity for innovation around evangelism, around reaching our neighbor.
Chandler sees the rise of religious nuns as an opportunity to sow seeds of hope through his church planting ministry. To encourage support, he plans to fund each new church planter who partners with the Acts 29 network up to $50,000. Today, the network supports over 700 churches in 50 countries.
I don't know who's watching this, what their heartbeat would be, but where you have a healthy local church made up of people who love Jesus Christ and know his word, darkness gets pushed back in 1,000 different directions. It's not one big church that actually threatens the gates of hell. It's 1,000 little lights in the darkness that kind of make up the brightness and the heat of the gospel. And so I want to be about pouring into that and giving my influence towards that, giving my time and energy and money towards that.
Chandler and others remain undaunted by America's religious realignment. They still see fertile ground for outreach to nuns and others, and for growth among professing believers through genuine Christian discipleship. Brody Carter, CBN News.
Well, finally tonight, Caitlin, you know, here in D.C., we're suffering with a lot of heat, but it's extremely hot in Texas, especially this week. The wave of triple-digit temperatures in the Lone Star State is inspiring some creative ways to cool off, though.
While for many, going to a water park is the way to beat the heat, Austin's Typhoon, Texas decided to go the extra mile for their guests. While an employee dressed as Elsa sang along to Let It Go from Disney's Frozen, water park employees got to work, dumping nearly 15,000 pounds of ice into the wave pool.
Oh, that's one way to cool off. But did you see Elsa? She was fully clothed and fully gowned.
You know, with 100 degrees forecast here for this weekend, I wouldn't mind jumping into a wave pool of ice.
All right, I'll let you go in first. Well, that's going to do it for Faith Nation.
Have a great weekend.